In a world where justice is meant to protect the innocent, some actions go far beyond the line of duty, and the consequences are severe. A young black girl, full of potential and promise, found herself caught in a nightmare that no one should ever endure. When two officers of the law, those entrusted with keeping people safe, chose to cross a line that would forever alter her life, the pain they caused echoed far beyond that night. What started as a routine interaction quickly turned into something dark and unimaginable. Humiliation, threats, and an unthinkable betrayal of trust. What happened that night isn't just about a victim, it's about a system that failed to protect. As we dive into this story, we'll uncover the truth behind the abuse of power, the trauma inflicted on a young girl, and the ripple effect that led to one of the most shocking moments in recent history. But the question remains, what happens when the very people who are supposed to uphold the law become the perpetrators? How far will the law go to protect its own, and at what cost to the victims? Stay tuned, because the story is just beginning, and what comes next will leave you questioning everything. The story begins in a quiet neighborhood, where this young girl lived with her family, far removed from the chaotic world of law enforcement and its darker side. She was just like any other teenager, navigating life with dreams and ambitions, unaware of the kind of danger that lurked close by. That night, everything changed. As she was walking home from a friend's house, a routine traffic stop escalated in an instant. Two officers pulled up, their intentions unclear at first, but their actions quickly became unmistakable. The officers, who should have shown restraint and respect, began to intimidate her with threats and crude comments. At first, she tried to stay calm, hoping to end the encounter as quickly as possible. But the situation grew tense as the officers' behavior shifted from aggressive questioning to outright harassment. They knew her name, and they knew where she lived. The power imbalance between them and the vulnerable teenager was overwhelming. It wasn't just a stop for questioning anymore. It felt like a carefully orchestrated plan to humiliate, to break her spirit. As she stood there, heart pounding, she wondered, was this some kind of sick game? And if so, what was their endgame? The pressure mounted, and the fear began to sink in. This wasn't a simple case of misconduct. Something darker was unfolding, and there were no signs of it stopping. But what was their next move? The air around her felt thick, like she was drowning in it. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, each beat more urgent than the last. Her hands were clammy, and she clutched her phone tightly, unsure whether to dial for help or hold onto it as a lifeline in case things got worse. The officer's words echoed in her mind, cruel and laced with something darker than just anger, something she couldn't quite place but sensed all too well. The more she resisted, the more their behavior became erratic. She tried to stay calm, hoping to escape the encounter without further escalation, but they weren't having it. One officer stepped closer, his words sharp and pointed. The tension grew, and the fear in her chest began to take hold. At the same time, there was a shift happening elsewhere in the neighborhood. Her family had started to notice something wasn't right. Her older brother, who had been out nearby, overheard the situation unfolding and rushed to her location. His instincts told him something was off. As he approached, he could see the two officers standing too close, too threatening. His protective instincts kicked in, and he knew he had to step in. But would he get there in time? He was just one person against two officers, and the risk was high. The unknown was gnawing at her now, and she couldn't shake the sense that this wasn't just a case of overreach or misconduct. It was something personal. Why her? Why now? As her brother neared the scene, the officers noticed him and suddenly shifted their focus. Her stomach twisted. Were they about to escalate this further? Were they trying to push her into a corner that she couldn't escape from? The clock was ticking, and the tension was unbearable. Her brother was getting closer, each step a quiet echo of his urgency. But as he neared, the situation spiraled faster. The officers, sensing his approach, seemed to grow even more agitated. They turned, locking eyes with him, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to freeze. Her brother was ready to speak, to demand that they let her go, to intervene. But the officers didn't wait. They made it clear, through their posture and icy stares, that this wasn't just about authority, it was about control. They were asserting power, pushing the limits of their position. Her brother hesitated, knowing the risks, but fear for his sister drove him forward. The air crackled with the tension of the moment. It felt as if every breath she took was a countdown to something awful. She wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she could only stand there, trapped in this suffocating nightmare, watching her brother get closer, praying he wouldn't make things worse. She felt so small, so helpless. But the officers weren't backing down. In fact, their movements seemed more deliberate now, more threatening. Her brother stopped just a few feet away, eyes darting between her and the two officers. The silence was thick, heavy. For a split second, it felt like time had frozen. Then the first officer spoke, his voice cold and commanding. "Stay out of this, or we'll make it worse for you too," he warned, but his tone wasn't just a threat. There was something in it, a dark certainty that made her blood run cold. It was then that she realized something horrifying. They weren't just trying to intimidate her. They were trying to push both of them into a corner, to make them react, to provoke a reaction that would justify their next move. The horror of that realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Would they go that far? Would they force this into a situation that neither she nor her brother could control? Her brother, sensing the danger, but also refusing to back down, took another step closer. "You need to let her go," he said, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. But the officer's smile, cold and cruel, suggested that this wasn't just a power struggle, it was a game, and they were determined to win. Just as the tension reached its peak, something unexpected happened. A car screeched to a halt nearby, the sound slicing through the air like a knife. It wasn't just any car, it was a black SUV, its headlights cutting through the dark like a spotlight. Her heart skipped a beat. Had someone called for backup? Was help finally arriving? The officers turned toward the vehicle, their expressions shifting from dominance to something else, something unreadable. But the surprise didn't stop there. The door of the SUV swung open, and out stepped a figure that neither she nor her brother could have ever expected. It was the chief of police, the very person who was supposed to ensure that justice was served. The moment he stepped onto the street, a cold hush fell over the scene. His presence was enough to stop everything in its tracks. The officers who had been so aggressive now stood stiff, almost like soldiers caught in the act, not knowing whether to retreat or stand their ground. The chief looked at the officers, then at her brother, and finally at her, his gaze calculating, sharp. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone chillingly calm. But his question didn't seem to be aimed at resolving anything. It felt more like a command to keep everything under control, like he was measuring the situation and deciding how best to manage it. Her brother's jaw tightened. The man who was supposed to serve and protect was now standing before them, and there was no telling which side he was on. Was he there to stop this madness, or was he simply going to reinforce the officers' actions, turning a blind eye to their abuse of power? His arrival only deepened the mystery, and the stakes were now higher than ever. Everything had changed in an instant, and the horror of it all seemed to grow with each passing second. She wanted to scream, to beg him to help, but the words stuck in her throat. Was this another level of the game they were playing? And if the chief was involved, how deep did this corruption run? The seconds stretched, unbearably slow, as the tension between the officers, the chief, her brother, and herself became a ticking time bomb. Would anyone be able to break the cycle? Or was this the beginning of an even darker chapter? The chief stood there for a moment, his eyes scanning the situation as if he were deciding how to play his next move. Her heart raced, and her brother clenched his fists, but they were both frozen, unsure of what would happen next. The officers, who had seemed so confident moments before, now appeared nervous, glancing between their superior and the scene they had created. The tension hung heavy in the air. Then, in a sudden shift, the chief spoke. "Step away from her," he commanded, his voice cold and stern. It was a direct order, and for a moment, it seemed like justice would finally prevail. The two officers hesitated, exchanging uncertain looks before reluctantly stepping back. Her brother stood tall, his protective instincts kicking in, but he didn't let his guard down. He knew this wasn't over yet. The young girl breathed a sigh of relief, but it didn't last. Just as she thought the nightmare was coming to an end, the chief did something unexpected. He turned to her brother, his expression unreadable. "You should have stayed out of it," he said, his tone low and threatening.